Hello, everybody, and welcome back to video 45 in this playlist. This is the last video here. This is just finishing it up. There's no new knowledge per se in uh, this compared to the other 44 videos where we were going over game development. I'm teaching a summer camp to high schoolers this summer on game dev. So I had to take what's normally 2 semesters of teaching game development and try to make it fit in a week. This particular example is too big, but I scaled my lecture notes down, and the videos were originally intended just to edit my lecture notes as I made that transition from 2 semesters worth of material into 1 week to 1 week's worth of material. So it worked for that, but I thought I'd share the videos anyway. So this is the last video in the playlist, and there was no new knowledge. It was just more of the same thing we've done before. I jotted down some notes, but I wanted to go ahead and include this video just so that we get to the finished version of the rough draft. So that was one of my biggest tips is get to the finished version of your rough draft. Right, it's a rough draft. There's going to be little glitches and errors, and I don't want to use the word bug because the game will still run from beginning to end, but it's definitely not the polished off finished version. But get that rough draft finished as quickly as you can, and then start polishing it off and working on the fine details. Then get all those little glitches worked out when you can see where they fit into the whole picture. It's a whole lot easier than trying to clean things up when part of the picture it fits into hasn't even been created yet. It's still inside your head. So get that rough draft finished. So I wanted to include that in the video. And yeah, no new knowledge. I do have some notes here to take a look at. I guess the first thing on the notes was a bug in the previous video when we generated the aliens. All the aliens that we're going to run around and beat up with our stick. We had the alien ship do that. And you might remember that alien ship was scaled down to like 20% because the model was much, much bigger than I thought it was. So we scaled it down, but when that generated the aliens, they inherited that scale size. So I had to set them to a scale of 5.0. Let's look at that in the code real quick. So jumping back over to Godot and looking at the script on the aliens. Alien ship is what generates them. So I just added one more line in here. Hopefully that would have been your first guess as to how we access the scale. And there's an XYZ scale value, so it's a vector 3. So I just set it in as a vector 3 coming in 5 times bigger because it inherited that 20% scale. And that made the aliens back to the full size. So back to the notes. Creating the models was the same. The one thing you want to watch out for is interior faces are cold. So that means if we're standing like inside of a cube, we don't see it. We can only see the exterior faces. So when you make your model, make sure that you're looking at interior faces. Let's look at the models for that last scene here. So to handle that culling, I just started with the cylinder and then kind of duplicated the top a little bit smaller. And, I made it really, really big. I made it really, really big first. So that's the radius. So it's 100 meters by 100 meters. And then it was a double scale again, so 12 meters tall. And then I duplicated the interior face and zoomed that down. Can we see? I guess there's not really a good angle to look like. But then it's an exterior face of the cylinder here. And the top, most of the top moved down to the floor. I put this clear tube in here because I was thinking on the final draft. I don't know the name of the things, the little glass balls that have charged particles inside them. So when you put your hand up against them, you see the little arcs going to where you're touching it. I thought that would look really cool in the game. That's some fine detail for polished stuff later, but I put a clear tube here to hold one of those later, which would just be kind of like putting lightning inside of there. A polished detail for later. And that gives us our ship to run around in. And then a at least for the rough draft, there's just going to be a couple control panels that we have to smash. There'll be 3 of those, and then we'll put like 25 aliens in this little bitty space. And avoiding them to smash the control panels will be the challenge of the boss scene, at least on the rough draft. There might be a formal boss work it into later drafts. And here's the control panel I made. I just created a box. If I go in edit mode, added some, started adding vertices and stuff, and then I took some of those faces and split them up into a bunch of little bitty things and recolored them so it looks kind of like buttons. Nothing super fancy there, nothing we hadn't done before. Just start with a cube and add more vertices, edges, and faces and move them around. You get the shape you want. And you'll want to get practice with that. Even if you're always planning on working with an art department, you still want to have that familiarity with at least the basic idea of how to do it. So you still want to get some practice if you're heading into game dev. Even if you're always going to be writing code and working with artists, you want to at least know what to do with that. Oh, and if you're writing code, we can go in and access all these. Like in Blender, that's Python code. If I come over here, we didn't see that in an earlier video. If I come to the scripting tab and I say add a cube, and see down here, it just ran a line of Python. It just ran a Python instruction. So we can, obviously we can access any of that from code as well. So you want to be somewhat familiar with it. So there's the control panel. So then I made a copy of that and smashed it up really good. I just started grabbing random faces and vertices and mangling them around so that it looks smashed. So that's the models that I created. No new knowledge there. We'd seen modeling before, talked about that in an earlier video. I'll come back to this note in a moment. Whoops. So when we called the alien earlier, we accessed the animation tree from the collider and made that change. I moved that animation tree back to the alien. So then the only thing we did was call that get hit method, which kind of worked like an interface, even though we're in a language that doesn't have interfaces. It's kind of like an interface that in order to be an opponent of our player, it has to have a got hit method. And then the only thing our player does in the attack is call that got hit method. So the concept of an interface, we just don't have a formal interface here. But over here in the code, that was, right down here. So we called collider.hit, and then originally we were accessing the alien's animation from here, but I just moved that over to the alien got hit method, which was, yeah. So I just moved that over here where it kind of makes more sense here. Then we're not accessing it from the outside. We only have that one method. So then when I created a control panel, I set a variable called destroyed, and then some counter for hits, and every time it gets hit, it increments that counter, and after it's been hit 3 times, that destroyed variable becomes true, is basically what's going on there. And that model, if I go to the control panel, I gave that object both models, the working model and the smash model, and then turned the visibility off on one of them so that so that by default, the working one is what shows. That's true, and then this one's false at the start position, and then after it's been hit 3 times and this method gets called, just swap that out. So turn off the visibility on the working model and turn on the visibility of the smash model, and that switches between the scenes. So you can see not a whole lot of code there. Then the alien ship keeps track of those. Oh, wait, not the alien ship. It's on boss level. So boss level, put 3 panels in that. 3 of those control panels and a timer. And that's just to see that last animation. And then it just checks every time. If that just, well, we've seen an active variable before. So we just check every time and make sure if all three of those panels have their destroyed Boolean set to true, and we're still active, then start a countdown timer, which is just 1 second, so that we can see that last animation, and set active to false so it doesn't continually restart our timer. We saw that bug in an earlier video. And when it's done, it just jumps to the cutscene afterwards. What else did I have in the notes? Oh, and then I put the control panel on the same collision layer and mask as the alien, because that kind of worked nicely with that. What's effectively an interface, even though we don't have interfaces in the scripting language, where we're required to implement this method. It just kind of did that, and they basically behaved the same way. So didn't have to do anything fancy to interact with it. And then for our character to get to the ship, I put a small circular collider right in the center of that alien ship. And if the player is standing directly underneath of it and jumps, it'll beam up. And in a later polished draft, it will have probably a light shining down to kind of indicate the spot we need to stand at and all that. But that seemed like a good way. So like the alien ship shining down a light, that's almost a stereotype in our culture. If you stand in that light that the alien ship's shining down, then you can jump up and do that. Actually, why don't I add that light really? Well, I'll do that in a later polished version because I want to spend a lot of time making sure the lights are right. But basically, right now we stand where that light would be, and when we hit jump, then that beams us up into the alien ship to go to the boss seat. So hopefully notice there's not really any new knowledge. These are all things we've saw in the earlier videos. I just wanted to get it to a finished version and include that in the thing. So, oh, and I also copied the audio thing we threw in very quickly. Not the best beat I've ever made, but I copied and pasted that into all our scenes. So now we should have a fully playable game. So let's run through that real quick. Or I should say we have a fully playable rough draft. So I'm going to go to the intro cutscene, which is what probably should be set as the start of the game. So I'm going to go ahead and assign that now. And I feel like I'm at the end of the rough draft, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the main run button. And yeah, our intro cutscene is what needs to be selected as the starting. Whoops. Is what needs to be selected as the starting point. That'll load up, and we get our animation, which should just take a couple seconds. Of an alien arrival, interrupting this guy's fishing trip. And introduce the story of our scene where we can run around and beat up aliens with this stick here, which they're dropping out of the ship. We've seen all that before. I'll just try to make this quick, unless I just happen to encounter something between here and there. And when we get right around the center of the ship, when we jump, it goes up here. There's no aliens here yet, but in this small enclosed space, if there was like 25, 30 aliens, it'd be a lot harder to, it'd be a bit of a challenge there. And then those aliens are going to drop out right from the ship at set intervals, 5 at a time, so that as we get closer, oh yeah, and just like beating up the aliens, polished drafts will need a little bit of a delay there, add a timer or something, so that the control panel switching to the smashed version happens after the hitting animation instead of at the first frame of it. But we'll run around here, avoid aliens, or beat up the aliens that are here on the ship. And when all 3 control panels are smashed, it jumps to to the ending cutscene to finish out our story. So, a long way from a finished game, but a working rough draft, and then we can fight aliens running around that world, and it's a very large world, so it kind of opens up a lot of room for things to happen. A lot, maybe not a complete open world game, but a lot of different things we can do in all that space that's left there. So, 45 videos, definitely probably too much to squeeze in, make it too big of an example for a week-long summer camp, because I want to get the concepts in and get something small and workable with the concepts, so probably don't need to go quite so big. But instead of deleting the videos whenever I adjusted my lecture notes to get ready for that, I thought I'd share them on YouTube. Hopefully you found this somewhat helpful. There's lots of tutorials covering the particular syntax and the methods built into the game engine. Hopefully you noticed that as much as possible I was trying to stick to pure logic in the code. That way it translates to other game engines, and go over the concepts. Like we talk about storytelling and physics and all of the different pieces that we need in order to put a game together. So I hope somebody found this helpful. It was useful for adjusting my notes, and yeah, I hope you find it helpful. If so, I guess give a like on the video or something. And thank you for watching.